when I saw the coffee, I was like, oh, this is going to be an issue because it's not, yeah. And it is important to have, so.
Right. Especially, I've already talked about how much
Well, yeah,
What? Yeah, with all the statements of the church, that got to get out
Okay. Are there more people with PowerPoints? Perhaps they are PowerPoints? No, they're not. Just you? Yes, just me. Okay.
yeah. No, I'm not using anything, but you should check. I think they're doing it back there.
I used them, and they told me it was a clicker on the table.
Okay.
No,
Yeah. No, I'm sure. So this is the person here. Tori's the one.
If you can make your way back to your seats. They're wireless too, so that's good.
So I'm going to get to all back together?
Yeah.
Okay.
Santiago, do you want to do your presentation up here? I could. You're going to.
I'm going to stand, but you feel free to stand.
So there's going to be a clicker as well there?
Well, no, so that's what
They're working on. Okay, good. If not, you know what? I will call for it. It's fine. I only have 8 slides, so it's not. Okay. It's not going to be possible.
Right, so we'll...
Yeah, you might want to tell them that.
You're from Argentina?
Let's begin to find our seats again so we can get the second panel started in a timely fashion.
Did you know Leon Klinicki?
I met him many years ago.
Yeah, he's been dead for a good 10 years.
Yeah, he has been a pioneer.
Yeah, he and I worked together. Actually, he and I came here to do a program on the Passion narratives in the Gospel for the Archdiocese of Houston. That's like 25 years ago.
Was good?
Yeah, it was good. It was
I work close to I work close to one good friend.
Where do you work?
I was in different federations in Buenos Aires.
Where are you now?
Right now, I
Where? Oh, yeah.
Please find your seats. Our second panel today is entitled Jerusalem Towards an Inclusive Religious Discourse, Jewish, Muslim, and Christian Perspectives. This should also be a lively panel and an interesting panel to take part in. Again, we welcome our audience through our live streaming. I would like to introduce the moderator for this panel, Dr. David Grafton, who is the professor of Islamic Studies and Christian Muslim Relations at Hartford Seminary in Hartford, Connecticut. His bio is in the Jerusalem Conference book, so I won't go into detail, but Dr. Grafton will introduce all of our panel members, and we will start the second panel now. Welcome.
Good morning. It's going to be hard to follow that last panel. We'll do our best. So, religion is an all-inclusive part of the identity of the people of the Middle East. It is an identity that is both social, political, spiritual, and scriptural. But not just for the people of the Middle East or Jerusalem, but for all adherents around the world, especially those adherents who feel the need to speak about or act about this place, which we are gathered here today to talk about. Those adherents of faiths who feel the need to speak about or act on behalf of perhaps a scriptural vision or a God that might not be inclusive. And so today in this panel, we're going to flip that narrative, hopefully, and talk about ways in which Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, in various ways and perspectives, have inclusive perspectives. And so I'm honored and delighted to be moderating the panel. We have a distinguished group of scholars here of religion, and I'll introduce them, and then they will follow the same order as the previous panel. They will have 10 minutes to do their presentation. We will then follow that up with a conversation, a couple of questions that I will ask the panelists, and then we will open it up to you all on the floor. So as they are presenting and something comes to mind, please do write your question on a card, and that will be brought forward. We're going to go in this particular order as I introduce our speakers. Our first speaker is Dr. Amir Hussein, who is Professor of Theological Studies at Loyola Marymount University, which is a Jesuit university. And you have on your tables information about his latest book, Muslims and the Making of America, which he's going to talk about. Something I would simply add regarding his bio is that Dr. Hussein has taken and will be taking students from Loyola Marymount to Israel and Palestine this January with an Israeli colleague of his. Our second speaker is Father Elias Malin, who is a member of the Franciscan Friars, and he has a very distinguished bio. He's been involved in Roman Catholic and Christian Muslim dialogue for a long, long time, and we've been able to reap the benefits of his work, and I'm delighted to be on this panel with him. Most importantly, or further, Father Elias is on the UN Israel-Palestine Working Group, and he's been doing that since 2006. And our final speaker is Dr. Santiago Slobodsky, who is Associate Professor in Jewish Studies and Associate Director of the Center for Race, Culture, and Social Justice at Hofstra in New York. And in looking through his biography, I simply want to point out what I find to be really an honor, and that you won the 2017 Frantz Fanon Award. So for those of us who have done research and reading or teaching in the areas of anti-colonial or post-colonial literature,
1947, when the UN General Assembly passed Resolution 181 on the 29th of November. In terms of what was said earlier, General Assembly resolutions, my colleague Dennis Fredo from the UN Israel-Palestine Working Group, I am delighted he's here. General Assembly resolutions are not legally binding, but Security Council resolutions are. And there were Security Council's resolutions after November 29, 1947, that supported this. The resolution, which had been ratified by several subsequent resolutions of the Security Council, states, quote, "The city of Jerusalem shall be established as a corpus separatum." The map that they were dealing with as the corpus separatum included Bethlehem, and it shall be under a special international regime until the situation was decided through negotiations. Clearly, this is a goal which has not been accomplished. Neither before nor after the War of '67 have the negotiations on the status of Jerusalem been successful. Sovereignty can be an ambivalent term and can have connotations which are both theological and connotations which deal with international law. Sovereignty, understood as a theological reality, while important, is not helpful, however, when we are dealing on the terms of international law with competing theological claims. In addition, the theology of any one religion cannot play a determinate role in international law. It would seem that, at least while sovereignty is an important topic which must be dealt with, it is not at all helpful at this point in promoting it for an inclusive religious discourse. Pluralism. Pluralism, as it is generally understood, is a modern concept and must not be confused with earlier concepts which might have been analogous. By that I mean we find in the Hebrew Scriptures the concept of the ger, the stranger, the resident alien who is protected by the law. In Islam, the Ahlul Kitab, the people of the book, and the Dhimmi are rather enlightened ways of dealing with the other. These expressions of openness and fairness to the other were extraordinary for centuries. However, they are not the same as the contemporary notion of pluralism. As ahead of their times as biblical Judaism and Islam are in dealing fairly with the other, the assumption is always that one religion enjoys hegemony. The right of the other are not inherent, but are granted by the dominant faith. It is not a matter of parity or equality, but rather a type of religious noblesse oblige. The other is tolerated. The modern notion of specifically religious pluralism is based on a literal, for example, US, or practical, example, United Kingdom, separation of religion and state. In a pluralistic society, no religious tradition is inherently preferred, but religions function as a type of free market of ideas. Without equality, or at very least an even playing field, we might be able to speak of tolerance of the religiously other, but not pluralism as it's understood in the contemporary world. Islam and Christianity in their recent histories have enjoyed religious, cultural, linguistic, and political hegemony in many quarters of the world. Judaism since World War II, and most recently with the recent Israeli nation-state law, seemed to some observers to be attempting to achieve a certain hegemony of its own. Regardless of claims of the validity of theological claims to anteriority or superiority, it seems to me that no real inclusive discourse is possible without a mutual acceptance of equality between the interlocutors. Religious freedom. Religious freedom, or freedom of religion and belief, as the UN cryptically calls it, is one of the basic freedoms enumerated in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, etc. The issue of religious freedom is something I've done a lot of work on. It comes to the forefront in many discussions because of the egregious violation of this right in many areas. One does not need to go far to see believers being persecuted, discriminated, and even killed because of what they believe. Groups like Yazidis, Sabaks, Rohingyas, hitherto unknown by most people, are well known now because of genocidal wars being waged against them, often by members of other religions. This aspect of religious freedom is glaringly clear precisely in the breach. There is, however, another very important aspect to the notion of religious freedom that does not seem to be receiving much attention except in religious circles. I believe she's Israeli, but Anat Skolnikov has written a very important book on the religious freedom as group or individual freedom. This notion of religious freedom is precisely in response to situations that arise where religious freedom is not being threatened. It deals not so much with basic human right in the abstract, but with within the context of conflict of rights. The situation is as follows. The assumption is that both parties in the conflict have a legitimate right to their belief, but the effective practice of the belief of one constricts or even eliminates the rights of the other or others. It's a very complex, but it's an extremely important issue. There has been, over the decades, a vacillation in determining who or what is the subject of the right to religious freedom: the individual, the group, or both, and if both, what happens when the individual and the group are in competition. World War II saw a shift in emphasis, because of things that happened, for example, in the Sudetenland with the right of groups, so the shift of emphasis after World War II placed the right to religious freedom almost exclusively as the right of individuals. In recent cases in Europe, however, there have been conflicts between the rights of individuals and the rights of religious groups, both on the grounds of religious freedom. This is happening to some extent in the United States, but for some reason is not often, if ever, perceived as a conflict of legitimate rights to religious freedom. My suspicion at this point is that there is an issue of religious freedom that is intimately connected with promoting an inclusive discourse about Jerusalem. That issue deals with the conflict of legitimate rights of all the parties involved. For millennia, the conflict of rights between religions have been solved militarily, and by the way, I agree, military solutions is an oxymoron. But historically, conflict of rights between religions have been solved militarily and with violence and with a clear or not so clear winner or loser. That can no longer be the case. Unfortunately, there are almost no mechanisms, even academically, to deal with this type of a situation. In conclusion, which is more a matter of time than adequacy, the following points seem to me crucial in promoting an inclusive religious discourse between Jews, Christians, and Muslims on the question of Jerusalem. 1, arguments based on sovereignty are not helpful, ultimately for any side, and tend towards a might makes right, and the last one to arrive wins, an attitude which is hardly productive of inclusive discourse. And if you're the last one to arrive this time, that doesn't mean, and 3,000 years of history show, there may be somebody behind you. Secondly, the total equality of all the interlocutors must be maintained. 3, a legitimate conflict of rights must be recognized, together with the recognition that no one interlocutor will get everything, regardless how legitimate, especially when it is to the detriment of another interlocutor. It must be an issue of the common good. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Santiago Slabotsky.
Thank
We
you.
have a PowerPoint here.
Thank you very much. I came to bring you some good news. Lunch is coming. Can we have a PowerPoint, if you don't mind? It's coming soon. Oh, before we actually get the PowerPoint, I want to thank of everyone who actually has helped us to make this possible, especially the help of Mitre Rahev, the invitation that I received from Mitre Rahev, and everyone who actually is working behind the scenes to make this possible. I am a teacher, and as such, I need a blackboard. So this is what I am going to find today. What I'm going to speak to you today is about one very, very simple concept. And the concept is not working. Can we pass the slide if you don't mind? Thanks. It's possible. Actually, I have great images, so I want to show them to you. Great, thank you so much. So the idea of the Western Creed of Jerusalem is a central part of what I want to talk to you today. What is this Western Creed of Jerusalem? According to a long-term Jewish thought, Jews have been foreign to their societies. Originally, this was an anti-Semitic dictum that people have followed. And the only solution for this foreignness of Jews has been to establish a Jewish nation-state. The second aspect is that Jews have always longed from Zion. That means that they always long for what they lost, and is represented in Jerusalem. And during the last 150 years, this has crossed with a crusade spirit that made and put together a Judeo-Christian tradition that we have never seen before. But I want to put, for a moment, this credo into question. Can we pass to the next one, please? The first question I want to ask you is, why are all Jews foreigners? I want to introduce you to one of my idols, Yaqub Sanu. This was a 19th century Egyptian who engaged in one of the most radical revolutions in Egypt. He led a newspaper there, and he coined or popularized, according to the source, the term Egypt for Egyptians. If Jews were foreigners everywhere, if Jews did not belong to societies where they were inhabiting, why he will call Egypt for Egyptians? Something doesn't work in the narrative. Perhaps it's not that Jews were foreigners everywhere. We are just foreigners in some places, but we are very, very much a part of the land in others. Can we pass to the next one, please? The second question I'm going to ask you is, were Jews always longing from Zion? Let me introduce you to one family, the Sasson family. They have been for over 2,500 years in Iraq. They did not long from Zion or Jerusalem for a simple fact. They were going to Jerusalem quite periodically. They were merchants. They were doing business. And they were coming back home to Baghdad. This has been doing this for actual centuries. So the question is, did actual Jews long from Zion?